Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and it's September 26th, 2014. This is episode number 171, Free Will, Its Refutation, Societal Cost, and Role in Climate Change Denial. And that's the title of this book that I published in April of 2014, several months ago. And actually, this is part 8 of this series, okay? We're just covering this book page by page. Okay, and right now we're critiquing an article. We're on the bottom of page 16. We're critiquing an article by a philosopher from the University of Florida, Al Mealy, who wrote a paper, an article in a peer-reviewed journal in 2012 titled "Another Scientific Threat to Free Will?" It's in the Monist journal. And so anyways, he's like, the claim that he makes, that I'm addressing here is like, he says he's apparently claiming that intentions have some kind of like unique property among thoughts, contentions, or cognitions, just like that intentions have some unique quality about them that somehow exempts them from the law of cause and effect. Because I think, he doesn't really like, he's trying to like, this is kind of like, with this reliance on intentions, he's kind of like conceding, well, thoughts are subject to causality. And, in previous episodes, I've explained why causality makes free will impossible. But basically, with this, he's saying that intentions are different. And an intention is a thought, okay? I mean, like, that's the basic, what I say here is like, intentions, however, do not possess a unique characteristic that exempts them from causality. It's a thought, any kind of cognition, any kind of feeling, any kind of physiological activity, psychological activity, neurological activity, anything that happens in our bodies, in our minds, is going to have a cause, all right? So there's no, whether it's intentions, whatever you want to call, whatever kind of like, cognition you want to refer to, it's got to have a cause, all right? And that's what refutes free will. All right, so now he again like demonstrates his like, ignorance of like physics, of like, the laws of nature. So like on top of page 17, he says that, quote, whereas the laws of nature that apply to deterministic causation are exceptionless, those that apply most directly to indeterministic causation are instead probabilistic. All right. He's misunderstanding, failing to understand quantum mechanics. In classical Newtonian mechanics, you can predict particle behavior by simultaneously measuring the particle's position and behavior. In quantum mechanics, with subatomic particles, you can't do that for reasons I've explained in the past. But basically, he's kind of like suggesting that our free will resides in the quantum level, and then like he's resorting to probability, which shows why he doesn't understand quantum mechanics. Now, basically, because we can't simultaneously measure a single particle's position and momentum at the quantum level, what we do to arrive at incredibly accurate predictions, we first, through classical means, through Newtonian means, we measure the simultaneous position and momentum of groups of particles, because that we can do. That we can do even at the quantum level, okay? So we've got these measurements, and we'll measure these groups countless times, many, many times, and that data set forms the basis of then deriving the probabilities that allow us to predict quantum particle behavior. Mealy and other people very curiously, very wrongly believe that these particles are behaving probabilistically, not understanding that probability refers only to our method of predicting their behavior. Nothing behaves probabilistically. If I flip a coin in the air. Okay, it's 50-50 probability that's going to land heads or tails, right? That in no way asserts or suggests that that coin is behaving probabilistically, okay? The probability refers to the method of prediction. Okay, so I think I explained that. All right. And the other thing is like indeterministic causation. I mean, indeterminism has various uses, and like this sentence, whereas the laws of nature that apply to indeterministic causation are exceptionless, those that apply most directly to indeterministic causation are instead of. It is so fraught with confusion because these terms have various meanings. He doesn't clarify. Indeterminism can sometimes mean that something is uncaused, but if something is uncaused, you can't attribute to a human being. So like if you're trying to like suggest that indeterminism or refuting causality will render free will, no. It's like, you know, if our decisions are being uncaused or they're being indeterminate, we're not causing them, okay? Anyway, so so basically, yeah, again, to refute his claim, his above claim, his mistake here is in confusing the mechanics used to predict quantum behavior with the governance of particles by the principle of causality. Okay. He next posits that, quote, Mohs' decision to help a stranded motorist is indeterministically caused by, among other things, his thinking that he should help. I mean, like, I'm going to just bypass this whole thing of the indeterministically caused, all right? Like, you know, basically it's caused, all right? And like, I think what he's referring to, and it's hard to understand because like, I don't think he understands this. So like, I think by indeterministically, he means like this causality can't be predicted by classical, you know, mechanics. That's the only thing I can think of. But anyway, he's at least conceding that this decision to help a stranded motorist is caused, okay, by another thing is his thinking that he should help. All right, but fine, you know, so like, all right, basically, if it's caused by his desire, you know, to think that it should help, again, he's introduced causality. That means there would be a cause for his thinking that he should help, and there would be a cause for that cause and a cause for that cause. That's not really the proof, though, the refutation of his claim that I use here, because basically he's referring to the probabilities still. So my response is that okay, where is it? All right, while one might, if it could ever be done, use quantum probabilities to predict that decision, it would not be the probabilistic mechanics of the prediction, but rather the decision's causal nature that would prohibit the decision from being free will. All right, so I just basically said, in other words, what I just explained. That basically, like, his thinking that he should help has a cause, you know, and it caused him to help. And so he's introduced causality, and when you introduce causality, you refute free will. Okay, middle of page 17. All right, he next suggests, quote, in agent causation, an agent is connection by the relation causation to an action or intention and that connection is not reducible to a connection between states or events and the action or intention. The guy, he doesn't understand what he's writing, because if he did, he wouldn't write what he just wrote. Basically, you know, without the kind of like the obfuscative, you know, sophist, you know, language he uses, basically what he's saying that that when we make a decision, that can't be explained by antecedent, by states or events and the action. He's saying there's no connection. Okay, I'm tired because like I did a show in Manhattan on Wednesday. This is like Friday, and like I didn't get home until 2, and then like yesterday I was super busy, so like my mind isn't working as well as it might. But so like I'm gonna like, instead of explaining how absurd this statement is, I'm gonna read, you know, what I read, you know, what I wrote in the book to refute it. Okay, so basically, bottom 17, my answer to Mealy's absurd contention is he's claiming that while a person may cause an action. Causality does not explain the action the person caused. There are two ways to refute this claim. The first is to categorically reject the idea that a person can cause an action or event in a way that is unexplained by prior states of the universe. Okay? The second is to note that the idea of a person causing an action acausally is incoherent. You know, he's implying that, you know, because it's hard to know what he means by indeterminism, because he's using it like without understanding. But if he's using it to mean that an action can be caused and uncaused at the same time, no, that's just logically, physically, conceptually impossible. Okay. So and the last so we're finally finished with the this is great. We're finally finished with the refutations of these philosophers, nonsensical, absurd, and you got to wonder how they get their PhDs, first of all, because, like, you know, understanding causality and its implications is not difficult. You could teach this to a junior high school, maybe even an elementary person. So anyway, so we've gotten through these four articles, you know, trying to defend free will in really, really absurd ways. I mean, I'm glad I wrote this book, you know, with this chapter, because it just shows so clearly how nonsensical, how absurd these free will defenses are. So before I go on to the next chapter on page 19, which is, that should be a good chapter, I just want to finish off with my last statement on page 18. All right, so Mealy's claim that intentional actions can arise without their having been caused combines the notion that intentions are exempt from causality with the idea that an uncaused intention can be attributed to a human and also lacks coherence. In other words, he's just what he's writing is just nonsensical. It's self-contradictory. It's contradicted by reason. It's contradicted by physics and science. All right, we are on page 19. And it's the beginning of the chapter, Implications of Free Will Belief and Disbelief. Okay. Now here's the thing, in 1982, I'm just going to explain this. It's not in the book so much, but, you know, I just refer to it briefly. But in 1983, I believe, this researcher, Libet, you know, with associates Gleason, Wright, and Pearl, they did a study, and it's an interesting study. We should get into this. They asked a person to either move their finger or their wrist, you know, at certain times, you know, and then then they had a clock on the wall with a very fast hand, much faster than the hands of an ordinary clock, and it had numbers, you know, like a regular clock, and then it asked the person to note on the clock the exact moment they made their decision. They were aware of their decision to move their finger or their wrist, right? So they had these subjects hooked up to two imaging machines. The first is an electroencephalogram that measures electrical activity, and so that was hooked up to their scalp, you know, measuring their brain activity. The second was an electromyogram that measures muscle activity. Okay, now something that they discovered previously regarding muscle activity is there's a thing called, do I get into it here? It's kind of like a point of no return. I'm not sure I remember the exact term. What is it? It's a point after which, you know, an action has been initiated and there's no way that it can be stopped. It's kind of I forget what it is. Anyway, so basically what they determined in these experiments, these series of experiments that have actually been replicated and strengthened vastly, was that before the person was aware of their decision to flick their finger or their wrist, you know, based on the report, you know, on where the clock was, motor activity, muscle movement, you know, motor activity for the readiness potential. Sorry, the readiness potential is like this mechanism where, like, you know, it's like activity that tells you that a motor activity is, you know, unquestionably going to happen. So anyway, these researchers detected this readiness potential for the muscle activity in this experiment several hundred milliseconds before the person was aware of their decision to move. Okay, now you might say several hundred milliseconds, you know, it might be like a technological error or whatever, but all right, in 2008, and I get into this later. I mean, actually, I think I get, yeah. So basically, I'll read this. Okay, so a recent replication by Fried, Mukamel, and Kryman, 2011, validated Libet's results, while another suggests that unconscious activity can precede conscious awareness of decisions by as much as 10 seconds. And this is a study published by Soon, Brass, Haynes, Hayes, etc., 2008. So basically, these experimenters found that, like, this readiness potential, this absolute certainty that an action was going to happen, happened like as much as 10 seconds before the person was aware of that decision. Now, clearly, unequivocally, very, very strongly, this experiment demonstrates how completely impossible free will is. Okay, so, like, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, like, by 1983 and now, like, by 2008, where we had so much stronger, more conclusive evidence of this, neuroscientists, scientists, physical scientists, the scientific community was beginning to really understand that as much as we might like to have a free will, no, it's physiologically completely impossible. Okay, so, like, what happens is you have some researchers, some philosophers, some psychologists who have devoted decades trying to defend free will. You know, they just, like, curiously, they don't understand they don't understand causality. They don't understand this simple process of cause and effect and how that makes free will completely impossible. But anyway, they began to see the something on the wall, where they began to see the light. They began to see the light. They began to realize that, like, you know, it was futile to continue defending this concept of free will because, like, the evidence against it was so preponderant, so powerful. So their next tack, their next strategy was, well, we can't win the free will debate because we're so wrong, because it's, like, so, you know, free will is so undefensible. So then they began to design. Oh no, right. What happened? Some of these researchers, you know, quite, you know, I guess sincerely, they believed that, like, if we do away with this notion of free will, if people understand that nobody has a free will, society is going to collapse, that, like, nobody's going to do anything, you know, according, you know, everybody's going to break the rules and everybody's going to say, well, you can't blame me because I don't have a free will. It's a very naive, simplistic kind of, like, understanding or evaluation of human nature and of society, all right, of civilization. But that's their fear. So, like, so what they did, knowing that they couldn't any longer defend free will, they tried to construct experiments that would demonstrate that even though we don't really have a free will, it's in our interest to believe we do, because when we believe we don't have a free will, that's going to lead to negative behavior, right? So, like, on page 17, I begin with a study by Vohs and Schooler, which they published in 2008. Let me find the exact title. Hold on. We've got about 8 minutes. Okay, it's called The Value of Believing in Free Will, encouraging a belief in determinism increases cheating. Okay, it was published in Psychological Science, and you got to wonder, like, with these, like, peer-reviewed scientific journals. I mean, even, like, Nature, you know, some time ago, I think in 2012, published this, like, completely absurd defense of free will. And, you know, I mean, like, that's how Well, that's the limit. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's why we're like in such trouble with climate change. I mean, a lot of these top scientists, you know, they know how to learn, they know how to remember what they've learned, they know how to like teach what they've learned, they know how to use what they've learned, but they're clueless in terms of understanding what they've learned, right? So like that's an example of, you know, all right, whatever. So anyway, these Vohs and Schooler, they're concerned, yes, people, you know, abandon their belief in free will, they're going to like act immorally and all this stuff. Okay, so what they did is like they primed subjects to either believe in free will or disbelieve in free will. We're at the top of page 20. And so in their first experiment, they divided their subjects in half. And they read a passage from Francis Crick, famous scientist's book, The Astonishing Hypothesis. Okay, so like one part of the group read, this was like the determinism, the no free will half of the group said, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Okay, this is Francis Crick. He's, I think, a Nobel Prize scientist, I don't think, in 1994. So Vohs and Schooler had half of the subjects read that statement to prime a belief in no free will, okay? And then the other thing they had them read was like, and you're nothing but a pack of neurons, okay? So like, you know, strong, like deterministic, no free will language. Okay, the other half read a passage that wasn't related to free will, okay? It didn't say they had a free will or not, whatever. So what they found is, after 20 trials, they had them do some kind of like a math, some kind of a, you know, exercise in the lab, and they gave them the opportunity to cheat. So what happened is like the group that they primed to believe that they didn't have a free will with Crick's statement, apparently out of 20 trials, they cheated 12 times on average. And the group that didn't have any priming at all, you'd think maybe they wouldn't cheat at all, but they cheated 9 times. So it's not that much of a difference, all right? But they were claiming, oh my God, you know, like if you disbelieve in free will, you're going to like cheat more. Okay. The problem, there are various problems with this study. And so like we're on page 20. Okay. The first thing is that the researchers, you know, tested their statements to make sure they wouldn't affect the subject's well-being, their emotional state in terms of how well they felt, right? But they didn't test to measure how this statement of like, you know, your sense of personal identity and free will are no more than the behavior of the vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules and you're nothing but a pack of neurons. They didn't test how priming subjects with those statements would not, you know, influence their affect, but influence their self-identity. You know, basically they were robbing, you know, in a certain sense, these subjects of their humanity. Okay, so like, in other words, like, if they would have explained to those subjects that they don't have a free will in a way that didn't reduce them to molecules and stuff like that, you know, that probably would have minimized the found disparity, the 12 and the 9. Okay. All right, but there's a stronger criticism here. When you understand that nobody has a free will, you also have to understand that doesn't give you license to do what you want. So in other words, like, if these researchers would have primed the subjects, well, you know, like, you don't have a free will, but, you know, this knowledge, you know, even though, you know, you have this knowledge, society and morality and reason dictates that you shouldn't use it to act immorally. If they were also primed in that way, I would guess that would also have minimized that disparity between the two groups. So, and I have a phrase that I use here, like on bottom of page 20. So I contend, what is it? Omitting this precept that, like, you know, basically we don't have license. Our understanding we don't have a free will doesn't give us license to do what we want. So omitting this precept, I contend, is like teaching drivers to push a gas pedal and turn a steering wheel, but neglecting to teach them to apply the brakes. I mean, it's completely irresponsible. You know, you're only teaching them one half of a very useful, you know, truthful, reality-based concept, perspective. Okay, we've got 2.5 minutes. Well, I'm not sure if we can get into this in that amount of time. No. All right. So I'm going to get into why this is so important, because we'll start off on page 21 next episode. So why is this important? I mean, the world's completely deluded about who we are as human beings. So many people think that they have a free will when we don't. And actually, I'm going to do an episode soon on, for example, the Greeks were probably the most philosophical group of people in history, okay? Now, the Greeks had terms, Greek words for fate and destiny, okay? They had the fates, remember the 4 fates and all that? They had terms for that concept. They had absolutely no term for free will. The free will construct wasn't actually coined until 380 AD, where St. Augustine, is trying to grapple with the question of well, if God is all good, then you can't blame God for the evil in the world. So he said, well, you got to blame humans. And the only way you could blame humans is by giving them this free will away from God, okay? Now, he could have blamed Satan. Augustine could have said, well, fine, God is all good, but Satan is evil, so we'll blame him for the evil. But no, he decided to blame us humans, and that's where this whole nonsensical, really harmful, situation about free will arose. And it's harmful because, I've explained in so many shows, I mean, it just keeps us at each other. We blame each other. If we didn't have this free will belief, we'd be so much kinder to ourselves, to others. We wouldn't become arrogant when we did things that are really good. We wouldn't feel so envious of people who had abilities that we didn't have. I mean, it'd be so much of a better world. But beyond that, for the world in 2014 to still believe that we have a free will, I mean, it's a delusion. It's a delusion that if we want to see who we are, and granted, it's a very surreal kind of a revelation. We have this kind of feeling, in a sense, that things are up to us, but absolutely nothing is up to us. And to my mind, that makes reality much, much more wonderful, because that makes us explore, well, what's the character, what's the nature of whatever is causing the world to be as it is. All right, well, that's all we have time for. So in the next episode, we're going to get more into these experiments by Vohs and Schooler attempting to suggest that free will belief is better than not. All right, see you next time.